Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Creatio Arena, where we are gathering thoughts in the leadership space around very different topics and opinions. Today's our topic is winning IT strategy. What is the best way to go with integrated unified systems or taking some range of best of breed applications? And today, as always, we have a few of our amazing speakers. I would love to introduce you to Mark Settle, seven-time CIO and two-time author. Mark's most recent book, Truth from the Valley, a practical primer on IT management for the next decade, has rocked the bookshelves. Mark, welcome to Creatio Arena. How are you today?
Morning, Alex. Thanks. Happy to join.
Thank you for joining us. And we also have today, Boutte, the Senior Vice President and Global Head of Banking Practice of Virtusa. Has more than 20 years of technology experience in the financial service industry and has the banking and financial services practice at Virtusa. Welcome to Creatio Arena.
Thanks, Alex. Glad to be here.
Perfect. And of course, as always, I have my co-host, Eric Hale, Director of Global Sales Enablement with Creatio. Hi, Eric. How are you?
Alex, doing very well. Thank you. Thank you for hosting another wonderful event here.
Always my pleasure. And to those who join us for the first time for Creatio Arena, I would like to remind that during this broadcast, you have the option to vote for one of the two options, whether you're we also have the chat area where you can share your thoughts, ask your questions, and really tell us what you think. And what we're going to be doing throughout this conversation is really discussing this very interesting topic from very different perspectives. We're going to have our speakers share their experience from their work, from their from their life, and of course, the idea here is really to hear what our audience thinks. What do they feel about this topic? And right now, I think we are actually around 50-50. So no specific opinion on one of the two. And let's really kick it off with some initial thoughts, initial ideas around our topic today. Mark, would you like to start?
Sure, happy to. So I'm actually joining you from San Francisco, and here in Silicon Valley. This is the hotbed, the fountainhead, maybe, of a lot of the SaaS applications that would be considered to be best-of-breed tools. And we also obviously have a lot of companies that are referred to as cloud native, meaning that they've never had any proprietary data centers. They've never purchased applications through perpetual licenses that they had to run on their own servers or things of that nature. And so, the firms that fall into this cloud native category can use several hundred SaaS tools, several hundred best-of-breed tools to run day-to-day operations. But I was associated with a company over the last couple of years, Okta, which would be familiar to many people. And when I arrived in 2016, we were already up to more than 400 SaaS tools that were in use. I'd say, realistically, probably about 120 really were the core applications. And there's another company here that you'd all recognize, but I won't refer to them by name. Their CIO told me that she had 800 SaaS tools that were in use. And so I know we're going to kind of debate the pros and the cons. I think the pros around the SaaS tools are somewhat obvious in the sense that they are best of breed. So, they tend to focus in a kind of a narrow niche, and they're providing very sophisticated capabilities and some of the narrowest processes that you can possibly imagine. But there's a term that we have started to use out here called SaaS at scale. And so, some of the issues start to appear when you get into this portfolio of dozens of SaaS tools or literally hundreds. And we can explore this in a little bit more detail, but really there's three problem areas that start to emerge. So one is obviously cost, because you have all these different functional groups that are running around spending money, and there's no central IT function typically that's in charge of all the vendor relations that are going on. There's quite a bit of administrative overhead in terms of getting the access rights and authentication privileges and provisioning and non-provisioning, etc. I think people don't appreciate the complexities of that. Then obviously security, as well. We've got a lot of tools have certain kinds of sensitive data, and the tools IT group may not even know that the tool's been deployed, and all of a sudden, employees are actually populating it or collecting data or transferring data into it. So really, it's administration, cost, and security are the issues that start to emerge when you think about SaaS at scale. So let me turn it over to Amit. Amit, what's your experience with best of breed tools?
So interesting that you say that, right? Best of breed tools, like you said, are very good at solving point problems. So if you look at any of the fintechs or most of the fintechs, what they'll do is they'll identify one part of the solution. They'll do it really, really well and solve that problem. But what happens is enterprise is not just that one problem. It's a holistic list of end-to-end solutions. And what happens is many of the organizations then have to tie these point solutions together, orchestrate them, and that causes a lot of IT overhead for them as well. So like you mentioned, you have already talked about issues like maintenance of different license versions, pricing, security. But more importantly is these point systems need to be able to talk to each other. And because there is no standardized interface across these point solutions, there's nothing which is like an open banking version or a buy-in standard for each and every point solution. What happens is you have to build custom interfaces in each of them. So even though you don't want to start development, it becomes more and more complicated. So that's where I've seen a lot of problems arise from a best of breed solutions. It's also to do with speed of execution as well. So if there are places where speed is the primary criteria, that means I need to get up and running very quickly. I don't have too much time in customization. I want a bundled product where I want to just quickly launch. A good example currently is, again, it's in public forums, I can talk about it. The Slack has actually done a case against Microsoft just today on Microsoft Teams. So when Microsoft Teams started, it's bundling all the different solutions into one offering. So if I'm a small organization who suddenly got hit with the COVID pandemic and I need to start doing virtual conferences, interacting with teams, having something like a team which is bundling all the different solutions together, it may not be best of breed. It doesn't have all the functionality of Slack, or it's not the best of breed in video conferencing, or etc. But having a tool which I can quickly launch to the market, even though if it is not best of breed, is fine. I don't need to look at the risk. So it's always a balance of speed versus efficiency versus complexity, which is there, which needs to be factored in. And this is where organizations have to take a decision. Sorry, Mark, you had a point?
Well, you brought up the integration challenge, and there's a subtlety involved here that I think some people maybe, again, aren't dealing with the numbers of tools. And so if you look at a functional area like finance or HR or sales, and that function goes out and purchases several SaaS applications, it's in their interest to invest in integrating all those different tools to support their functional mission. But unfortunately, it's kind of a waste of their time to worry about moving data into other functional areas. And so there's sort of, to really get the full benefit of the tool, IT has to take a leadership role, and find those connections between the HR platform and the finance platform, the sales platform, and the HR platform, or whatever it is, because the functions themselves, it's just not in their vested interest to, recruit the staff or develop the skills or hire the contractors to worry about those kind of connections. And so actually a lot of the power, of the collective portfolio gets lost because those investments are not being made. And you made a good point. Sometimes I've looked over my shoulder and kind of wistfully think back to, SAP and Oracle really aren't all that bad because they've integrated all those modules. I don't have to worry about it, right? And in the absence of that burden falls on the IT organization. And I would also comment that, when you appeal for staffing or trying to build up a center of excellence around this integration challenge, that's something that, although it's logical, it doesn't have a lot of emotional traction, within the executive ranks. It's not like, let's go make a big investment in some integrations center of excellence. What is that? Some crazy IT sandbox? They want to go out and play with something like that. Why would we want to have more staff in that area? So and this kind of gets me to the total cost of ownership. So when you look at the individual SaaS applications, they appear to be pretty cheap. I mean, in a relative sense. I mean, you can bring, and partly because they're so narrowly focused. So if you have a recruiting application, or you have a expense management application, or whatever, I mean, a lot of these are not, not being deployed enterprise-wide. They're specific to the function. So the price tag isn't like huge for each one. Now collectively, costs start to add up. But when you add in the fact that the people in the functions are administering these tools, integration challenges need to be addressed, like that total cost of ownership. And I haven't seen any really, insightful studies to really step back and say, well, if you're going to go to SaaS scale, what's that from an organizational or enterprise point of view? What is that total cost of ownership?
I think you guys bring up some great points, but I think another thing that we're also overlooking, we all agree that these point solutions are very narrowly focused. And if you think about the purchase process, right? So we talked about integrations, we talked about IT, but if you look at a purchasing cycle, we identify a use case, we pick a vendor, we roll out small, we prove it, and then we scale. So what happens after that? After you've proven it, you're going to come up with another use case and have to go through that cycle again. So it's a matter of, you got to select another vendor, go through the contracting process, roll out a small POC. All of this takes a tremendous amount of time. So when we talk about total cost of ownership, I couldn't agree more with the integration piece, but even from a purchasing standpoint, that's time, that's cycle, that's a whole sales cycle that we have to go through as well. And nobody wants to do that. These arenas are always, we could go either way, right? We could say, yeah, point solutions, but I think this one is going to lean in a certain direction. Am I right, Alex?
Yeah, absolutely.
And now I'll make a counter argument to myself, right? So
I know.
And I'll try to prove you wrong. So there's this advantage, right? So it all depends on which point solutions and how you orchestrate them. So like you mentioned, they are really good at solving some of the problems. So for example, if I want to do an enterprise risk function, if I have a platform-based approach to this point solutions, that means I have an underlying platform where this point solutions can plug and play seamlessly, then it makes sense, because what it gives me is it still gives me the advantage of the best of breed solutions with the flexibility to add and plug and play components as I wish. Today, I didn't need, for example, let's take example that I'm doing a purchasing function, right? So I'm doing, I'm an e-commerce site. Today, I'm only based in the US. I'm happy to provide support for credit cards and debit cards, and that's it. Maybe a little bit ACH. Now I'm planning to roll it out to India or China. Then I have to support the mobile wallets kind of solutions. I'm planning to reach out to Europe, and then I need to support account-to-account payments, the Swish and SWIFT and those kind of things which is there. Now, these are all pluggable components which are there. So do I need a best of breed? So I want to give the best experience to my customer in the region which they are. So if I do a generic solution, let's take example that I just take a only PayPal kind of solution and I say PayPal is the best, I'll offer everybody only PayPal, which is optional. The guys in China don't know about PayPal. They'll say, okay, great, sorry, I'm not interested. I'm not buying it. There'll be dropouts. So everything which happens is there is something which those point of sale solutions are bringing to the table. And like I mentioned, the challenges are at the integration, at the IT, at the administrative level. And if you are able to solve the administrative challenges or the integration challenges, then the best of breed solution do have a valuable role to play. It's all about how you create a platform kind of solution. So I think you gave an example of Salesforce or Oracle or ERP, right? What they created is created a core modules where add-on services can be built. And Salesforce is a great example. They have ability to plug and play components from any of the best of breed solutions. So it's a platform play. So when I talked about the solutions, I was thinking that maybe it doesn't have to be completely one way or completely the other way. There is a middle ground which is there, which provides a better value against maybe a best of breed versus a complete hybrid solution. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. And you said, a middle solution, it's a middleware, right? If you have a platform like MuleSoft or Dell Boomi, you can start to bring in those applications and make them start speaking the right language, right? Like we can bring them in, we can leverage that. But then again, does that add complexity to the network, right? Now you have an application layer, a middleware layer, a data layer. So I guess that's a question most companies face. Do we want to get do we want to get up and running quickly? Do we want to reduce complexity? What are we trying to accomplish as an organization? And again, it's all something that customers have to weigh. What's more important to them, I would guess.
So I think it's size strategic direction of the company, and the speed to market which the company desires. So these are the three qualifying criteria, I would say, in selecting some of these solutions. Sorry, Mark, I interrupted you.
No need to apologize. You know, it's interesting, if you look at some of the more recent startup companies, you could argue that the pendulum is starting to move back a little bit to a more monolithic kind of applications. Now, again, they're not broad, multi-purpose kind of tools, but just to comment on a few, there's a very successful company that went public, I think, in the last year or so called Appfolio. So Appfolio provides property management capabilities at multiple sites. So if we own 12 apartment buildings or, whatever, and all the functions that are involved in, advertising vacancies and administering contracts, and even some financial functions are built into this application. And there are others that are focused on running a law office or a legal profession. Again, a fairly large one that could be distributed across multiple offices. And the third example I would give is there's a company called Service Titan down in Southern California that offers solutions for contractors, people that would come to your home and repair your air conditioning system or put the plumbing in or something like that. They typically have multiple part-time workers, and they have scheduling and dispatching issues. They have contracts with their customers, etc. And a lot of these packages have interfaces to like a QuickBooks or some kind of a lightweight financial capability. So they don't always have embedded accounting functions or features. But it is interesting to me that in areas where it's focused enough, I think people are starting to say, well, I don't want to have like 5 tools to manage my contractors and schedule, dispatch people here and open up and do marketing and publicity for my service. So those kind of platforms are starting to emerge. I'm not suggesting that, there's going to be some kind of universal solution that's going to appeal to the Fortune 500 companies that would replace an SAP or a Oracle, but I think there is some evidence that the pendulum may be, coming a little bit back off the end case.
Yeah. Well, the idea here is also, if we kind of look, and this is coming from some of our experience, right, and some of our researches, Eric, you can back me up on this, that the average user of a bank or a financial organization spends about an hour a day just switching between applications, right, and just navigating through their desktop, trying to open Outlook and send an email, or pick up a phone and place a call, and not even considering all of those different systems that they're working with. And what we're seeing now is that more and more customers are looking not just for a application that would solve one of their business needs, but try to aggregate as many functions as possible. Of course, Mark, just like what you said, right, there are going to be systems that are irreplaceable, right? So ERPs, other very specific, market and industry solutions that are always going to be there. But if there are certain business apps that solve only one specific need or cover one specific use case or a couple of use cases, right, why not find a platform, and I mean, this is what you mentioned, right, that can actually host that functionality. And what we see now is also the fact that when we talk about a platform capability, right, the platform gives you the ability to actually reuse some of the available components that have been already built as plug-in and play modules, right, but as well gives you the flexibility to build on top of those already implemented use cases and take it much further and beyond, right? And this is where Creatio, again, as a vendor, found its unique spot, right, because we are a local platform for CRM and BPM, and as well building business applications, right? And our scope can start with just the classic CRM suite applications and modules, and take it further to HR, onboarding processes, even subscription management and billing processes in certain cases that are going to be integrated with those specialized solutions.
So you're completely right? A banking user is spending a lot of time switching between applications. And the reason why he's doing is, like you mentioned, many of the banks evolved as line of business functions. So what happens is, and that's true for many of the larger organizations, what happens is, as a company grows, there will be more and more specialization, more and more divisions happening within the organization. Each of the line of division will want something which works with them. And each of those components keeps on building. They have something just specialized for them. So CRM will have something which is for channel specific. Back office will have their own functions. The customer servicing will have their own functions, and they will modify the solution which is there to suit what works for them. So they will bring in the tools like RPA, they'll bring in AI, they'll bring in many other tools which are there, right, to weave all of the solutions together and work it. Now, what is happening is it was becoming very increasingly complex as well as costly for organizations to integrate all of this in the earlier times. Like you mentioned, you have to build a middleware for it, you had to bring orchestration engines for it, etc. Nowadays, with open standards as well as API integration becoming so easy, there is value. So like I said, something which was not working in earlier days, there is value in bringing that up right now. So for example, in Creatio, if you wanted to bring in Salesforce integration or for something else, or you wanted to bring in integration to, let's take example that a credit analytics system, for example, right? And there is a best-of-breed solution. Today, it is not as complicated as it was earlier days. The standards are common. It's going to be API microservice driven. I'm going to be having a JSON developer or something to do that. Because the standards and everything have started evolving and started taking the complexity out of things, it's becoming easier and easier to integrate the solutions. But like Mark, you mentioned, it's not about just that bringing those 2-3 solutions together. It is when you're designing the system, it's important to have it architected in the right way, to have this horizontal and vertical scalability. If it isn't thought about in this way, saying that, you know what, the solutions which I'm creating today will not always remain the 3 solutions. They need to be expanding. This pace of change is not like it's 1970s code or something which is still alive for 50, 60 years. The pace of change has accelerated. The technology changes. I think we used to have Windows updates every 10 years, 5, then it became 5 years, 3 years. Now it's like every day or something, I'll get some Windows update. So you know that the changes are happening very quickly, which means that you need to have a platform which can adapt to those changes, bring in plug and play capabilities of best-in-breed solutions. Something works today may not be working tomorrow. You need to be able to plug out the other solution without it impacting your core systems. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think the most value will come for players.
Absolutely. Well, I got 2 points. First, never tell Alex Petronenko that he's completely right. Okay, his head is big enough already. We don't need to do that. But the one thing that I would add to that is that when we're plugging and playing, best in breed solutions, we know that every company is unique, right? Even companies that are trying to solve the same problem have different requirements. And if we're looking to modify that custom application or that best in breed solution, that can be traditionally expensive. So that's why I think that also, when we talk about platforms, that's the benefit of it, right? That you can tailor a solution to your specific business needs without that outlay of cash. So that's a problem that I see with customers that I talk to. They have these best in breed point solutions, but as they have to modify them and customize them to their specific business requirement, that takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of capital, quite frankly, to make that happen. So I think that when we're talking about integrated systems and platforms, I think that that's where the distinct advantage is really we have the ability to tailor a solution utilizing technology that's already in place, technology that's easily understood, and then they can modify that application. So I like the strategy of bringing in the best in breed solutions. It's great. They get up and running very quickly. They can address a specific need. But it's really when that need changes. Amit, from dealing in the financial services industry, it seems like they're adding in a new application every quarter, right? Just to keep up with consumer demand. So how do we manage all of that, right? It's tough. And I see that as a huge challenge.
Yeah, and Eric, you can also think about it in a different perspective, right? If we're talking about a best of breed set of applications, right? It means that you have to have a certain diversity in the workforce that is going to be supporting those different best of breed applications, right? You need to have an administrator for this application. You have to have an administrator for this application, right? Or find a person who has experience working with both. Not even saying that you might have to have your own IT staff and developers, right? And you have to have a middle or senior .NET developer, right? You have to have a dedicated Salesforce, for example, developer, right? And many, many others. And this is a huge added capital that is actually going to be affecting your basically TCO of all of those applications, right? Whilst if you go with the platform capability, we're talking about having a certain dedicated staff, right, that can cover the design, administration, and support of multiple business applications within your ecosystem within the same number of resources, right? And again, if that platform, for example, like Creatio, is focusing around rapid development, rapid design, and increased time to market, time to value, we're talking about having fewer resources that are going to be able to cover more business needs. And again, this is going to be supporting the need in constant changes according to the business demand and business needs, right?
Absolutely.
So just to add to that, right? So let me take a counter again. One is this integration needs which you mentioned, right? So access to developers and trying to have this entire developer community and IT within the organization. Again, like the world is changing. Even Google, for example, is now saying that I'm going to be crowdsourcing developers. If you go onto that crowdsourcing model, so like I said, there are now solutions that are coming up which will allow you not to have a dedicated large IT organization which is there. I want a Salesforce developer, I use a crowdsourcing platform, get him for a couple of days, integrate it, change it, go ahead with it. Okay. The second problem is, Eric, to your point, when you said about integrated monolithic systems, the other thing which is there is those also require customization. So the point which you made is the best of breed solutions are very costly to customize. The single monolithic system like an ERP system or a PM system or whatever it is even more difficult to customize because they have very, very large ecosystem. They have multiple things which is there. They have a roadmap of saying that, okay, every quarter or sometime I'm going to be releasing these changes. And if anything is to deviate from the roadmap of changes, the organization is not able to dictate it. One organization out of 1,000 organizations for them who's actually using the platform is not able to dictate that roadmap, which is so it becomes extremely complex and extremely costly to change some of these systems. And the other problem with that is not only is it costly to change, if you do deviate and customize the system, after sometimes the product becomes out of quality. So what happens is you have a branch which is out of sync with the regular roadmap, and after some time you will realize, oh, I can't support this. You want a custom support for this particular thing, you'll have to charge X dollars or something. So this monolithic problem systems also are equally difficult to customize and change. They're good if you want to implement out-of-box solutions. Sorry, Mark, go ahead.
No. So we focused here on customizations, but sort of a different problem, the other side of the coin, if you will. Because the SaaS solutions, again, are relatively inexpensive, the barrier to entry is low, they can be implemented in short periods of time. I've seen a lot of cases where functional teams go off and will buy an app, and they will narrowly use one little sliver of functionality. They will have fallen in love with this dashboard that will allow them to review the sales pipeline. They'll fall in love with, the ability to manage a certain expense category like travel, but the app itself has very expansive capabilities that go far beyond applicant tracking within like a recruiting app. Typically what happens is there's an individual in the function, maybe they had experience with this at a prior employer, maybe they just went to a meeting or talked to a friend, they fell in love with this. Now this happens with platforms too. I'm not saying this is unique to SaaS, and the thing comes in and nobody really pays much attention in the grand scheme of things because again, the cost is low and it's up and running. But if you really stop and look, there's a lot of overlapping or underused functionality as that portfolio starts to grow up into dozens of SaaS applications. I mean, finance and HR are great examples of this. I mean, there's so many bolt-on applications, with those back office functions in Salesforce. I mean, it's all bolt-ons for all intents and purposes. So there's a customization challenge that exists whether you've got a platform or a SaaS application, and you've got the same underutilization problem in both cases as well. But when you invest in an ERP platform or some kind of a broader platform, you kind of go back to the mothership to see, is there something in there that I can actually use? But once that switch flips, you think everything's best of breed. I'm just going to go find like the coolest dashboard, or the neatest database, or most responsive system. then all those different tools start to add up, and the mess kind of grows. The swamp grows over time.
Yeah. And actually, Mark, this is interesting that you mentioned, you know, the development and implementation of an ERP system, right? Because from one of the recent findings that, and, you know, experiences that I had with one of our prospects is quite unique, because the organization, which I'm not able to disclose right now, they were actually looking for a platform that would provide them both low code and IBPMS capability to implement ERP solution, right? Or ERP-like functionality. So apparently now the organizations, large organizations, right, with very experienced IT staff, with experienced CTOs and CIOs, are also thinking towards that direction, that if they're going to be going into the process of digital transformation or replacement of one of their solutions that does not, and you know, historically have that flexibility and capability of you know, applying changes in rapid development, they're going to be again stuck in, you know, in a decade-long process of actually implementing it, right? And this is why they are looking for something that is going to give them the ability to quickly and rapidly deliver to the business, right? And this is, I think this is a very unique and very interesting case. And I'm pretty sure that we're going to see more and more organizations choosing this path of perhaps building some functionality from scratch, not using best of breed or best practice applications, but actually opting for more control, you know, higher ownership of their application.
I've got a question for Amit. Amit, have you seen a lot of interest in this kind of low code, no code development that gets pushed out into functional groups? There's this term, you know, that's becoming popular called citizen developer, effectively meaning a non-IT person that picks up a low code tool and drag and drop, point and click kind of interface where they can start to build their own functionality.
So
are you seeing that?
Started developing, yes. So definitely there's a demand for low code kind of platforms. So like I mentioned, the speed of change has rapidly accelerated. Okay, so I want more and more faster and faster change which is there. And it really is very difficult for fitting into the development timeline. So there is a great demand for low code kind of systems, which allows you to do changes rapidly and deploy them by business users, because they are the ones which are closest to the customer or closest to the servicer or something. So definitely there's a high demand, and that's coming to your point. So I always mention there's always a middle ground, which is the middle ground which I talked about is having a platform, a bottom platform, or a core. You could consider it a Lego box, right? It's for the Lego or something, the base plate of a Lego blocks where you can fit in different Lego pieces. So Lego pieces are your best of the breed solution. The base plate is your platform solution, which is there, and can bring them in to create different kinds of models. So you want a house, you can create a house. You want to create a board, you want to create something else. All of that can be created using this Lego blocks. And that's where I think the platform economy is going. If you see most of the larger organizations, be it Microsoft, Google, etc., what they've started creating is this platform economy, extensible model. Salesforce is also a great example. In the payments industry, there was First Data, which has created an application called, what is it, Phoenix? Or I keep forgetting the name right now. It's just skipping my mind. But that basically opened it to developers to do point of sale devices. On the point of sale devices, you allow the developers to create their own apps which can be downloaded. Or the App Store for us is a great example. So it's creating a platform through which you can plug and play these things. And that's where the maximum solution will come. So there are many solutions like Uncork or those kind of things, which are in low code platforms. So you create a base component, you use the UX to bring in quickly the changes which are there and allow the developers and the business users to start deploying them very rapidly. And that's the main thing. Yep.
If you see certain functions where that's become, you know, the uptake is faster, are there some groups in your experience that seem to be more adept at doing that?
I've seen it any place where it's closer to the consumer. That's the place where I've seen this low code, no code platform to be much more used. If you look at the back office functions, the middle office functions, not so much. So whether, like I said, the customer expectation, I think Alex made the point, right? The customer expectations are really, really fast nowadays. And in that point of times, that's the reason why low code, no code kind of platforms are very easy, where you can quickly decide with the customer and this is how the solution would look like, prototype it, put it in beta, let them test it out, deploy it very quickly. The back office functions, middle office functions have much more longer time frames to think strategically and start deploying it.
Interesting. So if we're just going to go somewhere else, one of the things I wanted to comment on was the myth.
Please.
So I think a lot of times people think of these best of breed tools as possessing a lot of flexibility. So if you make a bad choice, if I buy a recruiting tool to bolt onto my Workday platform and I don't like it for some reason, or something better comes along, oh geez, I'll just switch over and I can use this other tool because it's not the big platform. But if you look under the covers, it really what's happened is, in the old days with the perpetual licenses, and you spent capital dollars to buy applications, you typically depreciated those capital investments over a 3-year period. And you did that because you were fearful that if you depreciated longer and then you wanted to switch, you'd have to go to your CFO and say, can we write off that year 4 and year 5 depreciation so I can go get my new toy? And the CFO would look at you like you had come from the planet Mars. Like, are you kidding me? Absolutely not. So the industry standard was a 3-year depreciation. I mean, that's kind of what we all did. Well, look at where we are today. Every software vendor, and I hope I'm not stepping on anybody's toes here that's on the call, but most software vendors want a 3-year contract for their own, revenue reliability. Nobody wants to go like month to month or year to year. And so for all intents and purposes, you have that same set of handcuffs. Now it's expense dollars, it's not capital dollars. But if you woke up one day and said, you know what, this recruiting tool is not working for me, and I just saw this new thing over at my friend's company that I think would be so much better, well, you might still have a year and a half on that 3-year contract that you're going to have to come to terms with in some way. I mean, there are different negotiation tactics used, different kinds of things. But I do think sometimes when we talk about best of breed, we think this is like Uber and Lyft, and if I can't get my car on the Uber app that's on my phone that I'm out of the street for, I can just switch like over in 2 minutes and I'll go get the Lyft service instead. And that's not really the way it works under the covers, but I think people that are just maybe inching their way into this SaaS at scale phenomenon don't always appreciate the fact. I mean, once you pick that tool, and you're not wedded to it for life, but you do have this contractual obligation, and it's not something you're just going to walk away from, 3 months from now because it didn't work out.
Mm-hmm.
I think
that's a perfect point. I just had a conversation with a customer about that yesterday. We're having a technology roadmap discussion, and we're like, well, we could be a fit here, here, and here. And the CIO was like, yeah, good luck convincing our finance team that we're going to replace this investment that we have. So it's just timely that you brought that up. That's funny.
Yeah, Eric, but you also know that it always gets to proving the capability, right? Even if right now we're saying that this might be a good fit for us, but there's still the ongoing investment. Perfect. We're not going to jump into the middle of that. We're going to focus on other areas where we still need to prove the capability, right? Which we always do. And then we're going to not continue and, the expand, but the word spreads pretty quickly among the users, right? And within the organization. As soon as one department hears that the other department has great success with this tool, they're all very happy. They're more efficient. They're getting, higher commission on their sales. Everybody wants to have that. Right? So all of the business users, they start looking at that application, and there's, we are also ourselves always eager to go into a proof of concept, right? Run some, pilots just to prove the capability of fulfilling those needs by the time that you're actually going to have the contract expiring, right? You always need to be at least, I would say, 3 months ahead of your contract expirations, right? Or maybe a little bit more depending on the procurement cycle, to actually start the selection process, to look at the other application, right? To release an RFP if you're an enterprise or a corporate organization. And there's still going to be a process, right? But you have to be ahead of the game. You have to always look at the success of other teams. And again, you're never required to switch to a platform solution unless it has 100% guarantee of bringing success to the organization, right? You can still use point-to-point applications and best-of-breed applications. The question is whether you're ready to sacrifice efficiency, right, and ease of data integration, data communication between those solutions towards having that one specific feature that everybody likes in your department.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more with that. And it's but that's our negotiation tactics, as Mark had mentioned, right? So if we could prove a net neutral transition to another application, then we stand a better chance. But it's always that delicate line that you have to balance, right? Because that CFO is not going to disregard that investment at any given stage. So it's really our job to say, okay, if we can make it a net neutral transition, then it makes sense for an organization. Again, to your point, Alex, thinking of the future and when you're going to transition, I get that, but again, they still have that capital investment that they made in perpetual licenses or on premise. It's a tough negotiation, Alex.
I mean, if you're going to look only at your previous investments, right, you might as well never switch to a newer application at all, right? Be stuck with gold mine for forever. Right? Sometimes you have to let go. Sometimes you just have to.
Right. Well, that's our job as salespeople.
Right. Sorry, you were about to say?
Sweetwater.
Even though I just argued a minute ago that there are, in some ways, the switching scenario isn't all that different between the perpetual licenses of the old days and the SaaS. I mean, what is the big difference, which should be obvious, but that other point of view is the implementation costs of the new solution. I mean, it's like switching ERP systems is something nobody ever wants to do in their entire life. But again, I'll go back to the recruiting tool. If we fell out of love with one and want to move to the other, maybe we're locked into that 3-year contract. Maybe we're willing to, pay off the last year so we can get on to the thing that we want to get on. But then the actual cost of implementing, or the ease of implementing whatever the alternative solution is much greater in the SaaS world. And in fact, this is going to sound a little defensive from an IT point of view. But again, if you go back in time, when we bought apps with capital dollars, they were big, long projects. We had to go buy servers. We had to come up with a DR strategy. We had to figure out the soup to nuts lifetime of how this thing was going to actually get managed. And the business would complain well, why can't I have this tomorrow? How does it take so long? Why are we doing all this? Why do I have to go to all these meetings? I don't want all this training. Well, now, a lot of times, there's very little training that goes on. You license the new application, and to Mitt's point, you make the API connections, and pick up the objects out of Salesforce, and they're automatically populated into the new tool or whatever it is. And you look at the business, and from an IT perspective, you say, hey, we're done. It works. We've got people authenticated to be able to go in and actually use it. You gave us a list of who should have access. You wanted these data types, populated in the tool. It's all set up, kind of ready to go. And now the burden is on them to actually figure out how to use the darn thing. And just to give you an example of what that can entail. So there was an application that in a prior company we bought to bolt on to Salesforce, and it was used to help manage the pipeline, sales pipeline. And I saw some other tools come along that have other kind of capabilities, complementary capabilities. And I went to the head of sales operations and I said, I think we should really take a look at one of these other tools. And he said, are you kidding me? It's going to take me 18 months to get the sales guys to actually start routinely using that thing we bought, 3 quarters ago. I haven't even gotten the business benefits out of that yet, because these guys, they need to use it several quarters in a row to actually understand what the power of the tool is. And we're still a long way from that. So it is interesting. I think the world has flipped around, although you'd never find a functional leader that would probably admit this. From the old days of, IT sort of being the punching bag, I told you I was going to get defensive, of, slowing the process down, hamstringing the business, and why can't we have things faster? And they're never going to admit this, but, their own ability to, time to value of those new tools in those functions is something that doesn't get widely talked about. And in fact, you could argue that, that's the long pole in the tent. these days.
I think to add to your point, right? Whenever you're switching this cost as well, the migration cost and decommission cost is something forgotten about. So Eric and Alex might want to do a sale very quickly and they'll create a very beautiful business case. And then when the actual delivery comes to something, they have forgotten about, oh, you know what, I have to migrate this entire monolithic data which is there into the new platform. And after migration also, it's not completed, right? My servers, the old servers are still active because that has like last 6 years of data, 7 years of data, which I need to keep it for regulatory compliance purposes. What do I need to do with it? So I'll archive it, keep it. Even if I archive it to something, if I want to access that data, I need to use the same tool to be able to access that data because it's kept in a proprietary format. And that's why nowadays when somebody's architecting it really, so if I had to architect it 30 years ago, it would be like a single monolithic system. If I have to architect it now, I will look at those problems. I'll look at those problems and see, you know what, I might want to switch over the cost. So what should the data storage strategy be? Should I be storing it in that device? So should my sales data actually reside in Salesforce, or should I be controlled or executable or something in a standardized format which I can upload to other tools? So can I have it in a CSV format or whatever it is, right? So nowadays docs have to be interchangeable with each other. And that's the key which is there. So the standards are the ones which will make the things go around. And as and when this integration standards start coming in more and more, so integration standards, data standards, API exchange standards, etc., they're becoming more and more standardized. You will see it's better. The cost, the friction between switching the tools, the friction between assembling the tools and tying them together becomes lower. And that's where you'll see the emergence of this technologies. And the earlier example, even the crowdsourcing example is taken, right? People are no longer in that same mentality that I have to stay with one organization for last 10, 20 years, completely from cradle to grave kind of thing, which is there, and then retire with the organization. It's not the same mentality. Nowadays, we are into gig economy mentality, right? I've experimented with R and Python. Tomorrow something better comes in or something. I want to be able to leverage those tools. So I need something which is backward compatible. I need to be able to see, can my new tool actually consume my R Python models and actually create new AI models? Great. So we require that flexibility which is there. We require that crowdsourcing capabilities which is there. And that's coming up very easily nowadays. So it's not something which is like, especially in the recent situation or something, it doesn't really matter that, earlier it was, I need to be in office. I think there's a picture of office in the background. Everybody comes there, sits together, codes together, etc. Nowadays, developers are all over the world or something, coordinating and talking to each other and developing stuff, right? So it doesn't need to be even a co-located solution. So in that aspects, I've seen in my lifetime itself, right from like the 70s or something, when that was monolithic mainframe codes and Java and .NET, and now this new kind of low-code, no-code tools or something is big difference which is there. And as and when this difference is increasing, as and when the standards are increasing, the cost of friction, integrating, etc., is becoming low, you will see the emergence of this platform economics. And you're seeing that many, many things, Ubers and the Salesforce and the other systems of the world, even the Oracles and the ERP systems or something nowadays actually creating marketplaces where you can develop a component. So we have actually developed some components and deployed an SAP marketplace, which can be downloaded and consumed by SAP. Same with Microsoft, same with Apple, Oracle. All of them are opening that up, which was traditionally saying that, nobody can develop except by using my code, my standard, etc. Now they're creating marketplaces for me, saying that I want to create a platform. You can plug and play, create development, put it on that. And that's what he's saying, right?
Amit, so we've talked a lot about integration today. I'd be interested about how you think about managing APIs, whether there's sort of a center of excellence that curates APIs, both external APIs that you to ingest data from, or APIs that you've developed for the company that you expose to partners or others. I presume that at some point there have to be these kind of like enterprise reference APIs in one fashion or another. You can't just kind of let every developer run around and exercise different APIs. So maybe some insight into like how you go about managing enterprise APIs.
What we have learned in the last 5-6 years when the API standard is really accelerated is, like you mentioned, line of business started creating their own API standards and started exposing APIs to connect with their customers, partners, etc. That created chaos after some time. The APIs were not backward compatible. You've created duplication of APIs in one organization versus other organization. So retail banking and consumer bank, corporate banking of the same branch or same bank have different API standard, different security protocols, different everything, right? So we started creating this case. So nowadays we are recommending to have a center of excellence kind of thing, a single portal to house all the APIs which are there. That will have the control, the reuse, the collaboration aspect of it. So it's a portal where you can actually post a problem saying that, you know what, I'm looking for APIs to do with biometric authentication. Do you have something which is similar? So people are responding back to saying that this is the API which is available across the organization. Okay, but this doesn't meet my need. How do I integrate and collaborate with them? So it's going to be a single collaborative platform to expose ATS from the internal organization to the external. The organization, the COE, which is responsible for that, will be responsible for establishing the data standards, the security standards, the versioning standards, what documentation will be required to be able to approve that it should be part of this from a scale, resiliency perspective, from an architecture perspective, and also curate it from an external perspective as well. So definitely I've seen many of the larger financial institutions come to this conclusion after mistakes in the past. So like I said, it's always different in hindsight, but nowadays organizations are moving towards a center of excellence model.
And if I understood you correctly, this is something you're sounds like you're embarking on it. You're just starting present time?
So we've started this. So the problem started, like I said, the API journey started accelerating about 6-7 years ago. Of last 2 years, we already have implemented the solution. So we already have a world's largest cross-border API platform, which is provided by Virtusa and hosted by AIF in Singapore. And that's basically allowing banks and fintechs and financial to solve the problem of financial inclusion in the ASEAN region. So that's already been created, and that is something which we implemented a couple of years ago. So in this sense, there is really a place where a single API system starts coming in together. We are currently also supporting BIAN. So BIAN stands for Banking Industry Architecture Network. So like I mentioned, they are trying to define, they are actually successfully defining the standards of interfacing different applications with one another. So for all banking ecosystem, they're creating the data model, the service design standards about interactions with each other. And that's again a very strong partner for us. Actually, we're working very closely with them on defining the standards, supporting the ecosystem, etc. So these kind of standards are evolving, the platforms are evolving. We'll start hosting it. In the corporate banking world, Swift is actually coming and playing a major role. They have already started defining their entire standards. Swift is basically the organization through which all the financial messages move through. So everything to do with payments, cross-border trade, everything moves to Swift network. And they initially used to be very message-based, and they are actually migrating and start becoming API-based and establishing communities and establishing standards around this API standard. So you will see emergence of this small standards body which is there. Slowly they will also converge, but you will have a repository both within the organization and externally, which will have this consolidated API stores.
I know we're coming up to the top of the hour, and so maybe kind of one futuristic comment, which is, we're almost reaching a point. What's going to happen after SaaS? Like, what is going to be the next way we think about delivering business functionality? And it's interesting that a lot of the newer capabilities I would characterize as API as a product. So you're actually buying the service of an API like a Twilio, right? Or there's some kind of a business function or capability that sits behind an API. And I think, the enterprise architects of the future are not going to be thinking about this jigsaw puzzle pieces of SaaS applications and how they fit together. It's going to be these pretty granular services, that you can avail yourself of at an API level. And it'll start with more hygienic utilities. Maybe it's some kind of an API to source certain kind of data, or a communication service, or an authentication service, or a security service that'll get baked into maybe a customer-facing e-com platform or mobile application, and then that'll eat its way back into the enterprise. And so, if not only will we be complementing the platforms with SaaS tools that bolt on, but we'll be kind of rounding out the recipe with a number of APIs that have these very granular services that kind of ultimately are the glue that make the whole thing work together. And I think, more forward-looking progressive IT shops should do exactly what Amit's talking about, really start to look at API management in a much more focused and futuristic way. It's a source of competitive advantage if you can really leverage that going forward.
Yeah, that all sounds phenomenal, and I normally rely on Alex for this. So forgive me from my sales point of view, but what I see is, in particular, we'll take the banking industry a minute. Like, what about legacy applications? Like, let's say you have a Fiserv core banking system that doesn't want to accept this API. They don't want to work with you in the sense that you want to. I find that that's like a big challenge. Not necessarily Fiserv, but there's some other legacy systems. We won't point out any problem ones, but it's very difficult to work with them from an integration perspective. So how do you see that with those legacy type systems where they make it difficult to have that API connection?
That's part of my job, right? To try to make it simpler. So if any, or let's say a legacy system, it could be mainframe, it could be Java, anything which is there. If it is having difficulty in interfacing that, then what we try to do is build a wrapper around it and expose some of the services via APIs. So still have some kind of a shadow mechanism around it. And like Mark mentioned, it's to make sure that you can actually interface with that system, right? So Mark, I think you mentioned that its API will be the product which they'll consume. What I'm saying is API will be the pipe through which they're consuming the service behind that API. So let me take an example that a core banking system which is there, you require to identify whether he has enough funds to make a transfer or not. Now, if I want to do something and that core banking system is not able to give me that as an API or something, I can bring a middleware layer, get that information from core banking in a batch system, store it in the middleware as a running in memories kind of things, do all the addition subtractions there, and have a pseudo system. So core banking is still taking care of the actual ledger and everything. I'm maintaining a shadow system which is very real time, and that's exposed as a API. So that is where the complexities come to. Okay, and again, to make the point about future things, right? I again come back to the Lego analogy. The reason why Legos are so successful is they've identified you remember the small circle thing and everything fits together. I have some Lego toys out here. My kids always keep on playing with Legos. So it's just small things, right? They fit together irrespectively. Okay. And that's the API standard. As long as they're able to fit together respectively, doesn't matter which type of Lego, which is there, it's a pink Lego, yellow Lego, brick Lego, whatever it is, as long as we can identify a way of them fitting together, which is the interface as such, which is the API standard evolving, then you can build systems, more and more complex systems as and when, but you can still plug and play, remove old systems, take it out, and expand.
Yeah, but I mean, you can also continue your Lego analogy, right? If you're fitting together two pieces from a very different Lego set, they're not gonna look good. They're just gonna fit, right? But that's the only thing that they're gonna do. And Eric, again, any legacy system that an organization uses will reach a certain breaking point, right? The force awakens always, right? There's going to be something new that is going to replace something old, no matter how old it was there, no matter nothing is forever, basically, right? And if that vendor, that provider is not able of keeping up with the changing demands and the need of the businesses says that apps have to be connected, right? Apps have to be talking to each other and they have to be flexible. It's just irreversible, right? You cannot avoid that, basically. But gentlemen, we are actually almost at the very top of our hour for this conversation. This has been an incredible discussion. Thank you all for participating today. Mark, Amit, it was very exciting to hear your thoughts. And this was one of the most engaged arenas that we have ever hosted with Eric. So thank you very much for joining today. I would like to remind our audience that our next Creatio Arena is going to be hosted on August 6th. And our topic on the 6th of August at the same time is going to be if the future of the business is digital only, or we're still going to continue with, with some of the personal content there. Now, I would also like to remind our viewers and our audience that we also have a YouTube channel where we are actually, posting all of our recordings from the arenas, from our product battles, and from our webinars. So we encourage everybody to subscribe to our YouTube channel and stay up to date with all of our marketing communication, even if you've missed the live ones. At this time, gentlemen, once again, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be your host today, and I hope to talk to you very soon.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. It was
Thanks, guys.
thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks again.